Hey there, this is Casey with the M&A Launchpad podcast. Put it on your calendar. This is a do not miss one day event. There's going to be incredible headliners, but really at the end of the day, you're going to get a chance to talk to people that have made acquisitions, learn from some of the challenges that they've made, because this is definitely a challenging process. But more importantly, there's going to be people there that can help you and support you along the way, from great vendors, quality of earnings, how to run the due diligence process, and how do I get financed? How do I raise capital? How do I structure all of these things? It's going to be hundreds of people that are all focused, like-minded people. And man, everyone that's come has given us incredible feedback. We look forward to seeing you.
All right. In today's episode, we interviewed Trenton Lee, who is the 7-time award winner for doing the most transactions as a broker, right? And a constant wealth of knowledge, talking both about what happens on the sell side. How does a broker qualify sellers, educate sellers, get them up to speed, and kind of really level set where they are in reality? And at the same time, right, we dived into the buying side. What do buyers mistake? What are the common mistakes that they make? What do buyers do? What should they do? And how does a buyer become a better buyer for a broker? So Casey, what's some of your takeaways?
So for all of our listeners here, if you don't even listen to the whole podcast, you need to go to Trent's website and go through all of his stuff. He's built absolute amount of material and content to help you through your journey of buying a business. Great, amazing tips. However, you should listen to this podcast because it was an incredible amount of nuggets to hear from the guy that you're trying to find the business from. And you're talking about, like Ferris mentioned, 7-time award winning at the IBBA for the number one transactions in the world. That is incredible amount of volume. But to be able to get to a deal where he prices right and puts it out there, those are the type of brokers you want to be with. Those are the people you want to talk to. There's a lot of brokers out there, but not a lot of brokers do what the good ones do.
Yeah, and it's the first time either of us have spoken with Trent, and it was kind of nice to see he's very mellow, very level-headed, right? And he just walks through, here's the thought process, here's the whys, here's the hows, and here's how, as a seller or a buyer, you can come to those same conclusions, right? And that's ultimately what helps get deals done. So lots of nuggets in this one.
All right, guys, just take 1 second here real quick. When you're buying a business, ensuring the financial health of the company is critical. And that's where a quality of earnings partner comes in. Quality of earnings gives you confidence in the financials of the company that you're purchasing. It aims to protect your investment and ensure that you're stepping into a profitable business on day one. Patrick of O'Connell Advisory Group is your dynamic quality of earnings partner. He's here to help you buy the right business on your timeline. Patrick's entire practice is focused on business acquisitions. Your niche is his niche. And over the past decade, Patrick's helped more than 200 buyers like yourself successfully purchase and operate enduring, profitable businesses. In fact, Patrick's helped some listeners of this show. So if you're buying, looking for help with the quality of earnings, financial due diligence, network capital, and more, head to o'connelladvisorygroup.com or just click the link in the show notes.
Hey, Trent, welcome to the show.
Happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Nice, man, coming in from Vegas. So, we're excited to hear from you. And, having a good business broker, somebody that not only knows buy side and sell side and those things, it's mission critical because, as you know, there's a lot of business brokers out there. There's a lot of people in the area. And just because there's a lot doesn't mean there's a lot of good, and so there's a lot of challenges that are new listeners that are trying to buy a business, working with a broker, what they need to know. So, man, tell us about your background. Let's jump into it.
Yeah, so it's interesting because mentioning a lot of these business brokers we were talking about before, just some of them are honestly so bad. They're doing a disservice for buyers and sellers. My background was I got fed up dealing with business brokers, having sold 2 of my own businesses, that by the time I sold the second one, I'm like, you know what? I've got an accounting undergraduate. I started my master's of finance at Harvard, transferred over Texas A&M into the MBA program. I've got the background, I've got the experience. I think I could do a better job than these guys that I keep running into. And after I had sold my second business, I'm like, I'm time to get into it. So I went and got licensed, credentialed as both a business appraiser and a business broker, so that I could really understand not just taking a business to market, but properly valuing it. And it's one thing to get the price right, but you got to get the deal structure right as well. And that's where I think a lot of business brokers miss the mark.
Tell me about that appraisal process, because I before we got in the acquisition sides, I was a business broker. I did a couple business brokering because I was a finance guy. Moved into the brokerage. I got a deal done, and I'm like, hey man, that this is fun. I enjoy this. But the
Mhm.
valuation side, I think, is such a critical component, especially because I've talked to, and Ferris and I both have talked to sellers, and they're like, yeah, the broker told me I can get 10x on this, and you're like, man, I can't even. How do I even start and be realistic with them?
Yeah.
So how
Yeah.
is that valuation process?
It was great, and honestly, I had a hard time really diving in headfirst as a business broker until I went through and got a basic, well, from a credentialing standpoint, but a really good basic understanding of how valuations work to begin with. And most business brokers don't do that. They just dive right in as a business broker. And that's, to your point, that's the biggest issue. That was why I struggled as a business broker trying to initially get myself put out there in the market as a business broker. Because if I don't know how to properly price a business that can be backed up by SBA, that can get financing, that can meet debt service coverage ratio guidelines, that can meet the SBA SOP guidelines, then I'm just wasting my time and I'm wasting
Yeah.
the seller's time by setting unrealistic expectations, so that when I go to market, when I go and meet that seller, I want to have confidence to say, not only here's what you can sell your business for, but I know the underwriting criteria, I know the appraisal practices, I know the guidelines. I can now take this business that I just gave you a price quote for, and I can also get it pre-approved with the SBA. I can get it generally. I know we can find a buyer and get this financeable. It's bankable, and that's what I really felt like I needed before I dove in headfirst as a business broker. Otherwise, I'm just wasting everyone's time by telling, making wild guesses as to what I think the business can sell for.
Yeah, and I think, as a seller, right, you want to be told that right number because the last thing people want to do is deal with three trades, right? As a broker, you set it too high. Now the seller's expecting something that's not going to transact. And as a seller, you're ultimately pissed, right? Because in your head, you've already spent the money, right? And now you're like, okay, maybe I'm going to sell for a 5x and not a 9x. And so, it's a problem in this space. And, you see the same thing in even the commercial real estate side, right? Where you kind of have to get level people off on where reality is and get them there. And so maybe question for you though is, for sellers, right? How do you find these sellers? And, are they coming to you for valuations or are they coming to you already ready to transact, right? And, how much prepping are you doing with a seller before you even go and list it and start to tie in the buyers?
It's a really great question. So, kind of a two-part component of that question. How are they finding me at this point? I've closed over 650 transactions. So at this point, there's two things that I was really quite surprised about. I have not spent a dime in marketing in the last 8 years. It's 100% referral because I've done so many transactions. And then here's the thing that I didn't actually plan on happening. There's a small percentage of transactions that are just gonna turn over. Like, I sold a business 3 or 4 years ago, and for whatever reason, it's not a fit. They're burned out, they don't like it, they grew it, and then maybe they're ready to exit. And so out of those 650 transactions, if I get just 3, 4, 5% of those that need to resell, I get a built-in 20 or 30 deals, that are just coming back to me from deals I've done previously. And so what ends up happening is, because, and then that second part of the question is, how involved am I with the sellers? I do a bunch of educational training and videos before I even meet with the seller to begin with. So I call it like my indoctrination, my pre-framing videos. So before I even go out to meet with them, I've sent them videos on what SDE is, what EBITDA is, how to calculate what ad backs are, what are justifiable ad backs, where can we actually do a bank approved ad back, and where have they maybe been a little bit too aggressive on their ad backs and they just killed themselves on the valuation.
Mhm.
I talk about debt service coverage ratio, market multiples. And so I'm sending out a lot of content to my sellers before they even meet with me, so that by the time I meet with them, they have a pretty good idea of everything I'm going to talk to them about, what SDE is, what market multiples are. And now it becomes a matter of plug and play of the numbers. I'm not going into the seller who has no real background or education on how valuations work and how transactions are actually transacted in the real world, and coming in with my opinion of what the business is worth versus their opinion. Now, because I've given them so much background and education and content on how valuations work and what their numbers are, that we're just plugging in it's math. We're just now plugging in and we're calculating EBITDA together. We're calculating sellers' discretionary earnings, both of which are important, where a lot of brokers miss that. But we're going through and then we're pulling up market multiples together and we're just plugging in the math and we're calculating debt service coverage ratio together. So now they can see, how does the money math really work in this transaction? It's now no longer my opinion of what I think their business is worth, kind of like fighting against their opinion. And then you know how it goes. The sellers always think their business is worth more than it is. But when they really understand the concepts behind valuations and we're just plugging in those numbers, they really can't argue, oh, you know what? Yeah, maybe my business isn't worth $10 million and I need to be a little bit more realistic on the price. And it really helps set the realist. And that's what I think a business broker's a really important role
Couldn't
of a
agree
business
more.
broker is setting that expectation from the seller standpoint.
Because that's the thing, man. It's like, because when we meet with sellers, right, we do a lot of off market, so we're doing a lot of the education in the meetings with them, right? We've traditionally used brokers to build our thesis over the last few years. We've met a few good relationships, but all the deals that we've closed have been through referrals and through contacts, and we've had to go through an educational process with them. Valuation is always, it's going to be your biggest one, right? What is your company worth? How do you do it? How do you trade it? So if I have a broker that's doing that and I know that they're bringing me a deal that's already been through that conversation, and you're saying, hey man, this is what it's worth, it really cuts down a lot of what I would call the noise that's in between these deals. So I
Yeah,
would imagine that
100%.
when you're working with a buyer and Trent's bringing the deal, they know, like, hey, we're going to know what it's worth, what's the value is. It's going to be justified. I don't have to sit here and spend days going back and forth with the seller, or months.
Yeah, because we know if we're working directly with an off market, like where we ran into the seller, we met the seller, we know that that's a 1 year plus transaction, right? There's them getting educated, understanding, going to their buddies, realizing it's not, it's a whole thing versus if it comes through a broker, typically, right, that seller's already been level headed because the broker's probably not going to waste their time if the seller doesn't get there, right? If someone, wants something just completely out of left field, a broker's not going to spend their time. You only have so much bandwidth to do deals. And
Yeah.
maybe a question I have.
Ideally. Yeah, ideally. And
Ideally.
not only is it just the broker setting the realistic expectation on the price, but there's a flip side of that coin, which is the deal structure. What are the terms? Both of those conversations, I think, are really important to have up front with a seller to know that they can't have their price and their terms. It's a teeter-totter. If they want the price, we got to be flexible on the terms. If they want their terms, they're getting all cash up front, then we got to be flexible on the price. And so running that, what I call the money
Absolutely.
math, we got to work through the money math of both what is the business worth, but what are the terms to make the deal transactable?
Yeah. And question to you though, how many times or how often is it that you work with a new seller and you get them educated and they know that they have some homework to do to go get their business more, sell ready, right? Is that pretty often where you kind of do the first pass and then they're like, hey, give me another 6 months so I can really hyper focus on EBITDA and prove it out, et cetera, et cetera? Or do they usually get past kind of that gap and, they're ready to transact?
Yeah, it's a really good point. Percentage wise, I don't know. I don't track that. But if I had to guess, majority of the people that call me are, you guys have heard of, the D's: divorce, disease, death, whatever,
Mhm.
whatever it happens to be. There's some reason they're selling the business. It's not just because they're kind of thinking about it and they want to retire in the next couple of years and they got a couple of years to plan and prepare and they're getting an evaluation ahead of time. Obviously, I would love that, but most of the deals I'm getting are people that are approaching me that say, "Look, I've got to sell this." There's a real reason driving the sell,
Motivated
and maybe
seller.
they're just flat out burned out as well. But there's primarily a reason, so they're going to probably, as long as it's somewhat reasonable, that valuation, they're going to probably just list it and go with me, unless they are so unrealistic or they have too much debt or they need so much money, and it's just not any close. Then they've got to go back to reality. But that's a big mental blow for a lot of these sellers, because by the time I'm talking to them, they're already thinking about exiting. And so when they hear they can't exit for anywhere close to what they need, or they've got, like I said, too much debt, they have to then mentally go through that gymnastics of getting themselves back not only into the business but back into growth mode to grow that business. And a lot of them just aren't there. At least that's at the point I'm talking to them.
Yeah. Yeah. Running a business is very different than growing a business, right? And that's why a lot of times, public companies is two different CEOs, right? And it's just, some people get complacent in their business and it's just tiring to grow. So,
yeah. And I know you mentioned before, and I don't want to forget because I'm going to write it down. So you have a lot of content out there. You've got a lot of materials and things. So someone like us that are like, I can use that when I'm going through my sales process with these off market deals to start thinking about, hey, my education piece. So like, where do you have all that data? How does someone follow you to get all that content?
Any social media channel, they can find me
Okay.
on all of them.
Cool.
And then I've got a school community with, like we were talking about 30 hours of free content, walking them buyers. This is buyer focused content. How to be prepared as a buyer, how to be taken seriously by business brokers, what to do to really kind of define your buy box, get pre-approved for SBA lending, how to find deals, how to analyze deals. We've got a
Cool.
tool analyzer, how to underwrite deals, all the contacts from due diligence experts to lenders to attorneys to escrow services. I've got this school community. It's totally free for buyers to go through, and they can find it any social media channel of their preference. I'm on it. They can look me up and find all sorts of videos and links to anything they want to go through.
Yeah, and we'll put that in the show notes for listeners. So I guess shifting gears, right? You kind of touched on. So far we're talking about selling, right? The sell side. Right. Let's talk about the buy side, right? How do buyers find you, and really, how do some of those early conversations go? And what are some of the? I'm gonna ask you a bunch of questions. So how do some of those conversations go? How do they find you? And what have you seen maybe change over the years, right, with buyers, right? Have you seen anything change in terms of the deal size, the type of deal, the quality of the deal, all the above?
Yeah, so a couple of questions there. We'll tackle each of them. How do they find me? At this point, I've got probably 45,000 buyers on my database, segmented by industry that they're looking for, all of which who have like gone through the process. They've signed NDAs, they've signed non-disclosure processes, and so I email them listings. In fact, talking about social media, what we just talked about, I post pre-market deals about 7 days before they go public. I'll post it on my social media followers, but I'll email out to buyer database on deals that are coming up or deals that are on the market. Um, good good listings will attract the buyers. So I know this is a buyer focus, so
True.
let me just kind of give you the broker mentality here. Buyers are a dime a dozen. I have no shortage of buyers. A good listing, in fact, I'll give you an example. I have a medical billing company that we're closing on this afternoon, $3 million transaction. I had 27 full price LOIs, not just like indications of interest, not to include the hundreds and hundreds of buyers that inquired about it. I'm talking about 27 LOIs. Good listings will attract buyers. And so to answer your question, how do they find me? One, my database, and then two, good listings will attract the buyers. And ideally, if you find a good business broker, you'll want to get on their list, somehow connect to them to find pre-market deals. That's helpful from a buyer standpoint. Your other question about what have I noticed have changed in the marketplace? Buyers are, and this is fantastic. I think this is a really positive change. Buyers are becoming more sophisticated. There are tons of it's very much the old kind of cool startup, the grind of the startup, what used to be bragging rights and cool has switched to, and I think it should be because it's so much more safer and less risky to buying an existing business. As you'll see online, buying boring businesses. And with that, it comes a whole host of some good, some bad. social media gurus and content creators that are providing their approach to how to do this and how to analyze deals, but comes with that a lot of content and a lot of education. And so buyers are becoming more sophisticated,
Mhm.
and they're realizing how much safer it is and how much better it is, how much easier it is to buy an existing business that's profitable, that's established, has got history, rather than start a business up from scratch, the high risk startup. And so those buyers are coming better prepared and better educated than they were years ago. At this point, I've been almost in the industry for 10 years. And so there's a noticeable shift in the education that the buyers are coming up with here.
Yeah, and I mean, it's the fact the internet makes information, readily available to everybody, right? Same thing in the commercial real estate. People used to think the apartment down the street was owned by some big institutional company out of New York, and they didn't understand that it's syndicated, right? It's traditional people that have some extra money that are looking to invest. And so I think the transfer of knowledge and information is just really opening. I think that's really what's starting to accelerate in this space, right? We just got back from the McGuire Woods Independent Sponsor Conference, and there have been more and more people there each year, right, than the previous year, and significantly more. I mean, I think they had almost 1,700 people registered for this one versus the conference was started 7 years ago, right? And people are getting more sophisticated. They're starting to understand that this is something that can be done, and they're starting to learn on how to structure it, right? And some people, this as well as I do, Trent. Some people just shouldn't buy business, right? Buying a business is not for everybody. So some people are infatuated with the idea versus the reality of running a business is a whole nother thing. But for those that have the acumen, that have the knowledge, have the sophistication, they're getting the knowledge at least to be able to go transact and do it correctly. And I think that is a huge shift in the space.
Yeah, I agree. And the better a buyer can be as far as education as to what to expect and what to know, the better prepared they are. Because at the end of the day, they're the ones that are coming in here signing a personal guarantee with the SBA or partners if they're raising funds, and they're the ones that have responsibility to operate the business. And so it just makes it for a lower risk investment, which in turn is a better option for them.
So of the deals that you're looking at, sellers carrying, what are you seeing? Are you seeing a trend now, especially because SBA rates are fairly high still? They're around 10%. Are you seeing the seller being willing to carry 20% or 30% on a note? How are you seeing that trend? And it could be just deal by deal, right? If you price it right, et cetera. But where are you seeing those seller carries?
Yeah, it's a good question. I'm a little bit torn on this because from one stand, first off, most sellers don't want to carry, and so as a broker, I'm prepping them to say, look, you need to prepare yourself. There likely is going to be some type of seller carry here. But and I get why the bank will want to do that and see that. I get why the buyer will want to see that. But on the flip side, I'm not a huge fan of seller carry notes, at least large portion, because most of the time, most of my deals, my good size, and I play in the small to medium sized market. I'm not doing huge transactions. So most of my deals are SBA, the good ones are SBA funded.
Yep.
And the reality is most seller carry notes are at a shorter term than the buyer could get with an SBA. And so from if I'm putting myself in the buyer's position, I don't really recommend that they come in with this huge seller carry note, 30%, 40%, because that seller carry note's typically going to be at a much shorter period of time, 3-4 years, maybe 5, where they could roll majority of that over and get a 10-year term with the SBA. So I don't traditionally recommend much more than a 10% seller carry, just if you want from a buyer standpoint to have the seller have some skin in the game, and that shows the bank that there's some skin in the game. But it doesn't really benefit the buyer to have a longer, a bigger seller carry than that at that point. Otherwise, they're now compressing their cash flow because they've got to amortize, they've got to pay this seller carry note much quicker than they would through the SBA.
Yeah, but see, I think it depends on the type of deal you're doing, right? Because I mean, from our side, I love seller carries, not because we need them to carry the money, but it's a lot of times I can get better terms if I do it correctly, where it's a win-win. Seller's happy, we're happier, And again, that skin in the game, right? Like they're motivated to solve problems. And we have a company that we bought, it's a fairly sizable company, $20 million transaction, and the seller's been an important part of that, and it's been valuable. He's got his seller carry. He's there, part of the board meetings, pushing things along, and we're continuing to grow that business. And without that commitment from the seller, it would probably be in a very different situation than we are today. And I think
it would be.
Yeah. So I think it really does depend on the type of business, right? Maybe is kind of how I would personally qualify that.
Yeah, it also depends on the size of the business, right? If we're talking about a $20 million transaction, that's a totally different deal structure than the $600,000 little HVAC company that's just kind of a small, 3 or 4 man operation. That you're right. It depends on the deal, but it also, I think, depends highly on the range, the size of the transaction. And if you're using a seller carry note as a negotiation tool, then that's a whole separate conversation. I'm talking about just strictly from a debt servicing standpoint.
100%.
Yeah, fair enough.
Well, and I'll tell you for us, it's like, and I think almost everybody that's being trained out there right now is talking to sellers to have a seller carry. SBA, no question about it, wants to see the seller to carry something. I mean, I've done thousands of SBA origination transactions in my career. And I mean, it's almost like SBA wants to see at least the seller carrying, like you said, 10% or something. So they have some skin in the game. So anyways, it's just one of those things, it's for our listeners, especially, right? They're thinking about, hey, I'm going to sit down with this seller. I'm working with a broker. And I've met some brokers along the way that just kind of put us directly with the seller. Don't really get involved. They're more matchmakers. And we've got to have these conversations.
So I think depends on how vital the business is around the seller. Like if their core and their relationship and their personal goodwill and personal reputation, then that seller carry becomes even more important. Obviously, we can't do an earnout with the SBA, but you can do a forgivable adjustable note and get a lot of the same components of an earnout that would be in compliance with the SBA. And so again, if you're using that as a negotiation for a deal structure, then absolutely it's a vital component.
And so you're having these conversations with your sellers. I mean, if like this is the stuff, man. I've talked to hundreds of brokers about deals. You're probably one of the first I've talked to that says, "Hey, look, I do valuations. I sit with my sellers and give them education." So when you're putting out your listings, like you said, that's why you're getting so many LOIs, because you're putting them right in a pocket where the buyer doesn't have to go, man, that's just, how did he get there? I don't have to question your SD. I'm not sitting there going like, hey, Trent, what is this ad back? That's not an ad back. You're saying, no, we've already done it.
Is that truck an ad back or not? And it's like, well, yeah, the truck is, but the Ferrari's not, right? And kind of getting those conversations sorted out with the seller to get to something that just as a buyer makes it easier.
So Trent, for all your listeners, obviously you talk to these new buyers, right? So let's talk about new buyers. You talk to them, you're on the phone with them. Give us some things that our listeners need to know. Like, give us that 5 top things, like do not do this type thing that you would for a guy calling you right off the, fresh out of MBA school, wanting to make his acquisition. What are those things they need to do, and what should they not do?
So here's what I would say. Like if I were in a buyer's position, let me just tell you like how I would approach brokers to really be taken seriously and to get on their their essentially kind of VIP list. First off, I'd be reaching out to multiple brokers, not just one. What you'll find is if you reach out to 10 in your area, 6 or 7 of them are going to be so worthless you don't even need to bother talking to them. But you'll find 2 or 3 or 4 really good ones. And so you want to start building relationships with a number of different brokers. You want to be prepared with proof of funds. That's one of the first things a broker is going to find out is who, especially now as it's becoming more popular to buy these businesses online. There's unfortunately, I think my personal opinion, gurus out there that are doing a disservice trying to tell people they can buy a business for zero down, buy an absentee business and do zero money down. And so it attracts all of these people that from a broker standpoint, part of the broker's job is to essentially be the gatekeeper, to try and make sure we're not wasting the seller's time, because they've got to primarily be focused on running their business and keeping the margins up and keeping the profit up and the growth up, rather than spending all their time answering questions that from someone that's hoping to maybe raise the funds and borrow money from their uncle, and don't worry about it, I'll get the funds later. That really doesn't work. So I would be connecting with multiple different brokers. Be prepared to quickly sign their whatever confidentiality agreement, non-disclosure agreement. If they ask for proof of funds, you need to have something available to show that you are not a tire kicker. I would get pre-qualified from an SBA lender. Find an SBA lender that you like. If you don't, you can reach out to me and I can point you to one or two of them where you could get pre-qualified, and then define your buy box as a buyer.
Yeah.
So don't call a broker and say, I'm interested in anything that you have for sale that makes money. I just want cash flow. Or what buyers will say is, I'm industry agnostic. That language is the first thing a business broker is going to hear and say, oh, that's a tire kicker. This is someone who has no realistic the only people who use that language are people who have never bought a business before. People who buy businesses who they know what they're looking for. They have a defined criteria. They have industries where they know they can have core competencies. They have experience to get in there and operate the business and make it successful. And so you want to define really what you're looking for, so that you can reach out to the broker and say, I've got proof of funds, I'm pre-approved, here's what I'm looking for and why. That's an important question, because one of the first things I ask potential buyers is why are you interested in this business? And if you tell me because it makes money, my next question is, well, great, I get it. Yeah, that everyone wants a business that makes money, but if I've got right now a cabinetry business that makes fantastic margins, but it requires a contractor's license. And just this morning, I had a group that said, we're ready to go. This meets our criteria. Their only criteria was bottom line profit and the margins. And I'm like, well, great. In the state of Nevada, you're required to have a contractor license to do this particular set of work. Why are you interested? Do you have the background? No, we don't. We haven't really thought about that. Well, that's just a waste of time. So there's all sorts of businesses that sometimes you can get away with not having direct industry experience, but the first thing a lender is going to ask you is, if you go to them, they're going to say, well, do you have some sort of ancillary experience? Is there some sort of background that you have that would give us some assurance that you can operate this HVAC or this plumbing company or this surgical center? And so having a defined set of criteria and knowing why that's a good fit is really helpful. So I guess just to recap is, have
Good.
proof of funds ready, get pre-approved with an SBA lender, and have kind of narrowed down what you're looking for and why it's a fit. And then here's the last thing I would say. Brokers are looking for, I mean, and I'll just be realistic, good brokers that have good listings, like I mentioned before, we're just overloaded with buyers, honestly. I'll get 100+ inquiries every single day for my different listings. I can't possibly have a conversation with all of them. I can't possibly talk with all of them. What I'm looking for is those buyers that come prepared, that have the right background, that have the criteria, that have the funding, that have the proof of funds, have the right experience. And then here's what I would recommend as a buyer. Be quick to submit some sort of a non-binding offer, either an indication of interest, a LOI, and be slow to make decisions. Here's what I mean by that. Because brokers they're so overloaded. Good listings will just get hundreds and hundreds of buyers. And sometimes hard to sort through who's serious and who's not. And so if a broker gets a good buyer that's quick to make a decision, meaning they're going to submit an offer, but slow to make, I should say, quick to make an offer, slow to make a decision. Take your time and due diligence. That's really where you got to do your homework. And so I don't mind going through and spending my time with people that are quick to say, I've got some interest, I want to make an offer, and then take as much time as you need in due diligence to really then get into the
Great
tax
advice.
returns, the bank statements, the financials. That's where you got to do your homework. And often you just don't have the information you need to properly make a decision if you're trying to like stand out from the 500 or 600 buyers that inquired about a business, rather than trying to make that decision on the back end once you get into due diligence. And it's a non-binding offer. So if it's not a fit, then it's not a fit. You move on. If it's an option where the broker was sloppy in their valuation and they were too aggressive with the ad backs and you need to retrade, then you go to them with justification for saying, look, you added back 2 owners' wages that are full-time operators, and you just can't do that. You can only add back 1, and then we got to factor in the fair market value to replace the other. Therefore, there's a pricing adjustment that's justified here.
Yep. Great advice, Trent. Absolutely great to have you. So now we're going to get into the other side. We want to get to know about you. So we're going to turn over to our rocket round,
where we ask the guests the same 3 questions. So first question, what do you like to do in your free time?
I play tennis, competitive tennis. Most of us are old, kind of fat college players, but we still play. In fact, next week, our team made it to the top 16 teams in the nation. So we're going to nationals in San Diego for some tennis. So I play probably 4 to 5 times a week in the morning.
All right. Well, so then the important natural next question: what are your thoughts on pickleball?
Pickleball. I'm not old enough for pickleball yet. One day I'll get
pickleball. A lot easier with my daughters.
Yeah, but when you're competitive tennis, it's hard to get to pickleball, right? Yeah, it's a little slow.
Yeah.
So, all right, what's your most memorable moment in your business journey?
Here's a good one. It'll take me just a minute to tell you the story. So I had a granite fabrication company for sale, $5 million. We got a full price offer, got a buyer, not pre-approved, fully approved with the SBA 1 week out from closing. And the seller calls me and says, hey, let's pull the business off the market. I've got a ton of work coming up. Give me a year or 2. I think I'm going to double the business, and then I'll call you and we'll sell it for double the price. Like, no, we're not doing that. We're 1 week out from closing. These guys have not only got fully funded and approved and escrows ready to go, they quit their job to buy your business. You're not backing out. Well, he backed out, and it was the only one of the only times where I was upset, and so we went to court, arbitration at least, to force the sell. Came up with a settlement. He essentially owed us the full fee because we did our job. Of course, we'd settle it for much less. Before he ended up paying that discounted fee, I threw in there that I said, you know what? If he sells it anytime in the future, he needs to reach out to me and give me another chance. I thought, for sure, this guy hates me. He's probably not happy at all. Nothing's going to happen. Well, granted, to his credit, 2 years later, he calls me, says, hey, I'm ready to sell the business. Not only did I double it, like I told you, I tripled it. And I want you to come and sell it. And we took it to market, sold it for 19 million. Wow. And he paid the full fee, and it was as happy as can be over it. And
what a great story!
It was fun to watch it. I mean, it didn't work out great for the first round, but it was fun just to kind of see that whole thing go from start to finish.
And the buyers didn't have any teeth to force the sell, or did they get something in mediation settlement at least to try to
they got something
recover?
and they didn't want to. It wasn't worth. It was too big of a legal hassle to try and force it and to go through. And so they got something to just kind of part ways and be satisfied.
And you know what? That's some conviction by the seller, from the seller, because he's like, "Hey, I've got this," and you know what? He did it right, and then he took care of you, and that's what's pretty awesome.
We actually have a seller like that right now.
Since then, he's called me, and I've sold 2 other businesses for him, including some commercial real estate that he had tied to one of the businesses. So I thought he for sure was never going to call me again, and he had no problem. He had no ill feelings. He's like, "Hey, this is just business. I knew I was going to be able to sell it, so I was happy to pay you," and it worked out.
Great story. Great story.
All right, and last question: favorite tool or resource?
AI. I'm sure you get it all the time, but I have a ton of automations in my process. I automate everything. We didn't even talk about that, but it's probably why I have so many more closings and listings than most business brokers out there, is because my entire process is automated, and I use a ton of AI in everything I do.
Yeah, and it's funny for your business actually, right? A lot of your job is qualifying buyers. So do you, as a person gets into your database, do you have it automatically just go and, hey, give me a quick, 3 sentence paragraph about Ferris or about Casey, and it just kind of scrubs it just to help you know which buyers to actually focus the time and effort on?
I do have that, but further in the process. I don't do that for every single buyer because, like I said, some of these listings will get 100 NDAs in a day on it, and so I don't need to. I don't need at that point. But once a buyer's ready to talk with the seller, then I'm doing a little bit more background.
All right.
Very
We'll
cool.
make that 102. We'll get signed up afterwards. I don't think we're on your list.
All right, Trent, I know we said this, but for our listeners, they can get you on social media, LinkedIn. Give us some of the profiles just so they know where to find you.
Yeah,
And we'll put it in our show
Instagram,
notes.
Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, all of those. If they just do a search for, most of it's under Trent Lee Biz Broker, but if they just do a search for Trent Lee, they'll see it. YouTube, got ton of YouTube videos. Any of the social media channels will have in the bio will have a link to any of the free video courses that I have.
All right. Sounds
Outstanding.
good.
Trent, thank you for spending your time with us today.
Oh, thank you very much.
You got it. Happy to do it.
Appreciate it.
Thank you for listening to the M&A Launchpad podcast. If you've enjoyed today's podcast and would like to support us, please leave us a rating and a review after you listen. I'm Casey Minshew, and I look forward to talking with you next week.